began as a quiet observation, a dot of light moving slowly against the black canvas of space. At first, there was nothing unusual about it. NASA's catalogue was filled with thousands of such entries, distant, cold objects passing through our system before disappearing back into the dark. But this one behaved differently. They called it 3-Eye Atlas, a faint traveler that had already captured the imagination of every observatory that turned its eye toward it. It was small, irregular, and cold, a visitor from interstellar space. No one expected it to do anything more than glide past the sun, arc across its perihelion, and vanish. But the moment it reached that closest point, everything changed. You're watching Science Reshaped, where the smallest observation can change how we see the entire universe. If you love stories like this, mysteries that start with data and end with wonder, subscribe and stay with us as we uncover what happened next. Now let's begin with the story. At perihelion, objects like Atlas usually flare briefly, their icy shells releasing gas and dust as they approach the sun's warmth. It's predictable, ordinary. But what the telescope saw from Atlas was neither. The brightness didn't behave like normal sublimation. It didn't rise and fade, it flickered, not randomly, rhythmically. The signal wasn't chaotic like vapor bursts or debris scatter. It pulsed, one flash, then another, perfectly timed. At first, everyone thought it was an optical illusion. Solar glare, detector interference, anything but what it looked like. But then, as the readings poured in from multiple observatories, Chile, Hawaii, Spain, all reported the same thing. The object wasn't reflecting sunlight, it was modulating it. The implications were staggering. Nothing in known physics could make a natural body behave that way. It was as though Atlas was interacting with the sunlight, absorbing and re-emitting it in a controlled rhythm. NASA's early data suggested something even stranger. The spectral readings from Atlas weren't consistent with any ordinary cometary material. The light carried interference patterns, faint but precise, almost as if the surface wasn't random rock, but something layered, structured. The analysis teams ran simulations, each time the same impossible result. The brightness peaks aligned too cleanly to be coincidence, too deliberate to be natural. In one internal memo, a physicist wrote, "Either this object is the most symmetrical fluke of nature ever recorded, or it's responding to something." The line was quickly redacted from the official report, but the copy still exists in archives, a quiet testament to the moment curiosity turned into disbelief. NASA had seen anomalies before, strange spins, random flares, unexplainable accelerations. But Atlas was something different. It wasn't just changing course, it was performing, an elegant dance of light that no machine on Earth could fully explain. Astronomers noticed that the rhythm of the flashes wasn't constant. It was adapting, adjusting slightly every few hours, almost as if following a feedback loop, like something learning. A junior researcher suggested they compare the light modulation to known electromagnetic frequencies. When they did, the numbers lined up eerily close to the base frequency of NASA's own deep space communication signals. That detail never reached the public logs. But those who saw it knew the timing was too precise to be random. It was as though Atlas wasn't just reflecting sunlight, it was replying to it. By the time the object cleared the solar corona, NASA's monitoring teams had reclassified it from standard interstellar body to priority anomaly. Observation time doubled. The agency quietly coordinated with European and Japanese satellites to maintain a near-constant visual feed. And the more they watched, the more impossible it became to look away. Each hour brought new irregularities. Subtle energy discharges near the tail region, temperature fluctuations inconsistent with normal heating, and the faint presence of ionized gas forming geometric trails behind it. At one point, the pattern formed a perfect helix, symmetrical, stable, and utterly unnatural. Every major observatory confirmed the event, but no one could explain it. And perhaps the most unnerving part was this. The helix aligned perfectly with the Earth-Sun axis, as if the object had oriented itself toward us. It wasn't drifting anymore, it was looking back. As Atlas continued its passage around the Sun, it did something that made even the skeptics pause. It slowed down. The deceleration was tiny, just a fraction of a meter per second, But in the frictionless vacuum of space, that's like hitting the brakes on a ghost. Nothing natural could do that without an external force. When NASA ran the numbers, the math refused to cooperate. Radiation pressure wasn't enough, gravitational drag was too weak, and yet, the slowdown was real. One mission engineer wrote in his log, "If Atlas were a spacecraft, this would make perfect sense. But it's not, right?" No one answered. The closer Atlas came to the Sun, the more unpredictable it became. Its trajectory no longer fit the standard models. Every update from the observatories arrived with small corrections, each one shaving a fraction off the old numbers, and together they formed a picture no one wanted to believe. Atlas was steering itself again. When the Jet Propulsion Laboratory compared fresh orbital data with last week's projections, the results didn't line up. Something had nudged it off course. Not gravity, not radiation pressure, not any solar event recorded at the time. It was as if an invisible hand had traced a new path for it through the void. They tried every explanation: outgassing, fragmentation, magnetic interaction. Each failed. Whatever was moving Atlas was subtle but deliberate. For days, the team at Mauna Kea Observatory watched its light curve shimmer and pulse. To the naked eye, it looked beautiful, a tiny glimmer dancing near the sun's fire. To the instruments, it looked impossible. The pulse interval had shortened again. The rhythm was learning. At one point, the data smoothed out into a perfect mathematical ratio, one that matched the golden mean. Not random, not mechanical, elegant. That was the moment one senior astronomer wrote in her private log, "Atlas isn't orbiting, it's composing." When it passed behind the sun, the world waited. The light vanished for 22 hours. Then, when it re-emerged, every telescope caught the same instant, a sudden surge in brightness, 10 times stronger than predicted, like a flare announcing its return. But this flare wasn't chaotic. It followed the same pattern: 6 pulses evenly spaced, then silence. Across observatories, cheers mixed with unease. No natural comet behaves like that after perihelion. Something had changed within it, or around it. NASA's deep space spectrometers detected traces of new elements in the tail, metals that shouldn't survive near solar heat. The readings showed microscopic particles of silicon alloy, evenly distributed, identical in size. Nature doesn't manufacture precision, technology does. But calling it artificial required evidence, and evidence demanded caution. So they called it structured debris. 2 careful words that meant we don't know what we're looking at. As Atlas receded from the sun, its spin began to stabilize. Instead of tumbling, it rotated smoothly, like an object under control. The temperature variations evened out. It was as if the perihelion passage hadn't damaged it. It had recalibrated it. That was the realization that chilled the control room. Because nothing in nature corrects itself after facing the sun. Not asteroids, not comets, not rocks that have been frozen for eons. Atlas had adapted. When the signal reached the European Space Agency, they ran independent verification. The same numbers appeared, so did something else. A narrowband radio fluctuation at 1420 MHz, the hydrogen line, the frequency most radio astronomers use when listening for cosmic communication. It was faint, almost lost in background noise. But it was there, rising and falling with Atlas's 6-pulse cycle. Coincidence? Maybe. But then the same fluctuation repeated 12 hours later, right on schedule. At that point, even skeptics stopped pretending it was ordinary. Within NASA, discussions turned to control and containment. They couldn't publicly admit what they didn't understand. So they prepared new language, phrases that sounded safe: non-gravitational acceleration, thermal emission irregularities, photonic reflection modulation. Each one carefully designed to sound technical while meaning nothing. But behind those phrases was growing awe and fear. One engineer wrote late one night, "If Atlas is a message, we're still on the subject line." The sun had scorched half of its orbit, yet Atlas emerged brighter than before. Infrared scans showed no surface erosion, no outgassing tails, no debris fields, nothing lost. It had survived a solar pass unscathed. Objects that come from interstellar space don't survive the sun. They fragment, boil, vanish. But Atlas was intact, even refined. The data suggested its albedo, Its reflectivity had increased. It was reflecting light more efficiently now, as though the sun had polished it. That alone broke half a dozen known thermal models. To the scientists, it was data. To those who had been watching since the beginning, it was transformation. When it crossed the orbital plane of Mercury, telescopes captured one last unexpected sight. A faint halo, not dust, not gas, but ionized plasma, encircling the object like a ring. The radius stayed constant for hours, spinning gently before dissipating into space. That halo wasn't just light. It carried structure, repeating density nodes forming a pattern of 6. 6 again, always 6. That number would become the heartbeat of every later study, the key pattern that threaded through every piece of data Atlas ever left behind. In its quiet way, Atlas had rewritten the language of motion. Every physical constant we trusted now seemed a suggestion, not a law. It moved with purpose, it learned from heat, and it carried a rhythm no one could fully decode. By the time it slipped past Mercury's orbit and began its slow retreat into darkness, the scientists at every observatory were divided into two camps. One called it coincidence stacked upon coincidence, the other called it design. Neither could prove the other wrong. The final image from the perihelion observation showed Atlas glowing faintly, wrapped in the dying light of the sun. A reminder that sometimes the universe doesn't whisper, it hums, and when it does, the smartest thing humanity can do is listen. By the time Atlas began to drift beyond Mercury's orbit, the scientific community had split in half. Some saw a mystery begging for data, others saw something alive, not in the biological sense, but in the way it reacted, the way it chose. It had survived the sun without breaking apart, slowed itself against physics, and pulsed in patterns that refused to randomize. Whatever it was, Atlas wasn't just traveling, it was performing. At the Deep Space Network, analysts ran simulation after simulation. They tried to model every possible combination of radiation pressure, angular momentum, and thermal response. Each attempt collapsed after a few iterations. The numbers just didn't fit. Objects don't change rotation without torque. They don't decelerate without friction. They don't flare with rhythm unless something is guiding them. Yet Atlas had done all three. When a junior analyst compared the light, fluctuations to NASA's radar bursts, the same ones, used to track position, he found a shocking correlation. The intervals weren't random. They were mirroring the radar sweeps. That meant one of two things. Either the object was passively reacting to the radar signal, or it was deliberately synchronizing with it. The second possibility was too extraordinary to publish, but in private channels, that's exactly what people started whispering. At the European Southern Observatory, infrared readings revealed another anomaly. After perihelion, Atlas's heat signature should have faded gradually. Instead, it fluctuated, rhythmic again, rising and falling like breath. It was as if the object was cooling itself deliberately. By every measurable metric, Atlas was behaving as if it were aware of its own environment. A senior researcher noted in her diary, "We keep calling it it, but what if it's not an it at all?" The question hung over every meeting afterward, unspoken but undeniable. When the first composite images of Atlas's post-perihelion path came in, the shape of the trail made no sense. Instead of a scattered debris line, it formed a wave pattern. Clean arcs of ionized particles, equally spaced, rippling out like sound waves in a pond. Some scientists said it was solar wind interference. Others said it was information, encoded through matter. It was easy to mock those ideas on paper. It was harder to look at the pattern and not feel something looking back. Then came the alignment. For a period of 24 hours, Atlas's position relative to the Sun and Earth created a perfect angle, 33.7 degrees. No one noticed at first, but when a satellite's polarization filters caught a repeating flicker at that same geometric ratio, attention shifted instantly. The light wasn't random reflection anymore. It was modulation, like a prism tilting deliberately to catch sunlight. Atlas wasn't drifting. It was signaling through geometry. That night, the data visualization team converted the light curve into audio frequencies. What they heard was haunting. A gentle oscillation, slow, deep, resonant, almost like breathing through static. They played it again and again. Someone said quietly, "It sounds like something trying to remember itself." At this stage, NASA and the ESA held a joint meeting under a veil of secrecy. They didn't call it an emergency briefing, at least not on paper, but the tone was clear. The anomaly had outgrown its definitions. One official summed it up perfectly. "We came to study motion. Instead, motion studied us." They began drafting a new term, autonomous interstellar object. The classification meant nothing scientifically, but psychologically, it drew a line. Atlas was no longer a rock, it was a presence. A decision was made to send a probe. Not a direct intercept that would take years, but a relay beacon designed to emit encoded pulses back toward Atlas's trajectory. A controlled experiment, a test. When the beacon launched, the world didn't know. No public announcements, no press conferences. Only a few dozen people were aware that Earth had, for the first time, spoken back. The signal reached open space in late November. It was simple, a repeating tone at the same 6-pulse interval Atlas had once displayed. No words, no patterns, just rhythm. The universal language of motion. Then they waited. 3 days later, an anomaly appeared in the data feed. At first, it looked like interference, a distant background echo in the telemetry. But when the timing was measured, the room fell silent. The echo had returned exactly 6 hours after the outgoing signal. It wasn't random noise, it was synchronized. The same rhythm, the same pulse spacing, Atlas had answered. The response wasn't continuous. It didn't repeat on command, but once every 6 hours, the pattern returned. Faint, delayed, unwavering, like a memory carried across the void. That first reply changed everything. The data teams froze all public releases. The next update to the Minor Planet Center contained no mention of the anomaly. For the world, Atlas was just another celestial object fading from view, but inside the agencies, it became a classified dialogue. Each new pulse was recorded, analyzed, mapped. Everyone carried micro-variations, differences too subtle for human hearing, but measurable in frequency drift. And those drifts began to form a shape, a spiral. It wasn't Morse, it wasn't binary, it was structure, like the spiral of a galaxy, the swirl of DNA, or the path of a seed caught in wind. The scientists stared at the screen. No one spoke for a full minute. Then a quiet voice said, "It's not talking, it's remembering." And maybe that was the truth, because some memories don't fade, they orbit. And as Atlas drifted farther away, it carried with it the rhythm of two civilizations, one that had just begun to listen, and another that had never stopped. As Atlas drifted farther from the sun, its path stabilized again, but nothing about it felt ordinary. The instruments at Mauna Kea and the Deep Space Network continued tracking it long after most interstellar objects would have faded. The readings were faint but consistent, steady pulses, slight temperature variations, patterns that made no sense in known physics. Every 6 hours, the same soft flicker returned, sometimes weaker, sometimes clearer, but always present, like the echo of a heartbeat, too distant to be felt, but too rhythmic to be forgotten. Scientists had started calling it the pulse of Atlas, though officially that phrase appeared nowhere in the reports. Publicly, the mission was closed. Privately, the data streams were being analyzed frame by frame, every photon accounted for. Atlas had responded once, and now it seemed to be listening. The reply had changed everything. NASA's working groups were reorganized under new security tiers, and even within those circles, information was fragmented. The people processing the images weren't the same ones studying the frequency patterns. It was a deliberate choice, compartmentalization, but no matter how many layers they built, curiosity slipped through. One anonymous researcher leaked a line of analysis that would later surface in a private forum. Atlas has entered a stable trajectory, inconsistent with gravity alone. That one sentence reignited the obsession worldwide. If it wasn't gravity, what was guiding it? For the next month, Atlas maintained perfect balance. No acceleration, no spin irregularities. The object appeared to be at rest relative to the solar wind, an impossible feat for anything smaller than a planet. Then the next surprise came. The pulse shifted. Instead of 6 hours, it shortened to 4. The change wasn't random. It followed a precise decay curve as if counting down. A few days later, new telemetry showed minor bursts of radiation near the object's surface. Sharp, controlled emissions that occurred right after each pulse. At first, they looked like solar interference, but their direction was wrong. The emissions weren't coming from the sun's side. They were directed outward toward open space. Someone inside the control room whispered what everyone was thinking. "It's transmitting." The word transmitting didn't appear in any log. Officially, they called it radiative modulation. But everyone knew what they were seeing. Atlas was releasing energy, and the timing lined up perfectly with its pulses. The data suggested these bursts weren't scatter or heat. They carried structure. Repeating intervals, harmonics, clean divisions, the mathematical language of intention. When the signal was converted into audio, it produced a deep hum layered with faint oscillations. It wasn't a message, at least not in any known code. It was something simpler, like resonance. As if Atlas was tuning itself to something unseen. NASA's engineers started to look backward, comparing old perihelion data to the new readings. What they found was subtle but significant. The intervals between brightness peaks during the sun passage matched the timing of these new emissions. It was as if the object had recorded its own journey and was now playing it back. One of the team leads wrote privately, "Atlas is not repeating, it's remembering." The phrase spread quietly among the scientific staff. In meetings, no one used it aloud, but everyone knew that was what the data meant. When the European observatories joined the monitoring effort again, they reported a faint echo across multiple instruments. The pulse wasn't isolated anymore. It was rebounding through surrounding space. Something in the plasma field near Atlas was vibrating in sync with it, amplifying the resonance. This meant the object wasn't just transmitting, it was shaping the space around it. The idea was unthinkable, yet the readings were unambiguous. The field lines bending around Atlas weren't random distortions. They followed symmetry. Space itself was responding to its rhythm. As days passed, new images revealed another strange effect. The faint glow around Atlas had intensified, expanding into a geometric aura, an almost perfect sphere of light with evenly spaced nodes along its perimeter. Analysts described it as electromagnetic breathing. The brightness increased and decreased like the slow inhale and exhale of a sleeping creature. Yet nothing biological could exist there, not in the vacuum and radiation of deep space. The effect wasn't life, it was order, some unseen mechanism balancing energy across the field. Whatever Atlas was, it wasn't acting as a passive body anymore, it was operating. At this point, the agencies monitoring the anomaly knew they were watching something beyond known physics. The energy readings were consistent with controlled emission, yet there was no loss of mass, no sign of combustion, no mechanism visible. It was as if the energy appeared and vanished by intent alone. One scientist compared it to a candle that burns without losing wax. That description, poetic but true, captured what the data could not explain. The longer Atlas stayed near the inner solar system, the more refined its rhythm became. The 4-hour pulse narrowed to 2. The harmonics sharpened. When the frequencies were plotted graphically, they formed spirals, each perfectly aligned to the golden ratio, the same ratio that had appeared in its perihelion readings. It wasn't chaos, it was precision. And within that precision, a new pattern emerged. Alternating peaks forming pairs, 6 then 8, repeating endlessly. Some called it coincidence, others called it communication. But one thing was certain, Atlas was evolving. When it finally crossed the orbit of Venus, its reflective intensity dropped suddenly, as though it had dimmed itself deliberately. Observers expected a breakup or fragmentation, but the radar signals came back clean. The object was still intact. It had simply gone dark. In the absence of visible light, the infrared sensors showed faint traces of movement, a reorientation, a subtle turn. Its path shifted by less than a fraction of a degree. Yet that small turn redirected it toward a region of space far from any known gravitational influence. It was no longer heading outward along the predictable interstellar arc. Atlas had changed direction again, this time toward emptiness. To those still watching, the meaning was clear. The object had come close to the sun, endured its fire, adjusted. Its shape changed its rhythm, and now it was leaving with intent. It had completed something. One mission lead summarized it perfectly. It came here for calibration. The words were never made public, but they became legend among those who had seen the full dataset. In its final weeks of observation, Atlas emitted one last irregular burst, 3 pulses close together, followed by a long silence. It was the only time the 6-hour pattern broke. The sequence repeated once more, exactly 24 hours later. Then nothing. The hum faded, the light disappeared, and the readings flattened into the ordinary quiet of space. But no one believed it was over. Even after Atlas slipped beyond the range of the instruments, every scientist who had tracked it felt the same strange awareness, that what they had witnessed wasn't motion, but something closer to consciousness. The final report described it in sterile language, avoiding emotion, avoiding speculation. Object 3I Atlas has concluded perihelion phase and resumed outbound trajectory. Observed behavior remains inconsistent with known natural phenomena. Further monitoring required. But between the lines, everyone understood what the data could not say aloud. Atlas had passed through the heart of our solar system, and in doing so, it had left something behind. An imprint, not on matter, but on understanding. Because once you've seen something behave with purpose, you can never look at the universe the same way again. As Atlas drifted farther from the sun, space began to cradle it again. The intense glare faded, and what remained was the quiet glow of distance. A slow return to shadow. The telescopes tracked its fading reflection, each image softer than the last, until Atlas looked less like a traveler and more like a memory, moving gently through the dark. The pulse was still there, faint but steady. Every few hours, the same subtle rhythm brushed against the receivers, a whisper of light in the silence. Scientists listened with the kind of patience only wonder can create. They knew they were watching something that didn't belong to ordinary time. There was no rush now, no tension, just curiosity that felt almost tender. In those weeks, the excitement that once filled the control rooms gave way to something else, a calm fascination. It was as if everyone, from the researchers to the interns, had realized that Atlas wasn't a puzzle to be solved, but an experience to be witnessed. The data came in waves, gentle and quiet, and people began speaking softer, as though loud voices might disturb it. Computers hummed. Instruments blinked in slow intervals. Somewhere between the lines of data, a stillness settled, the kind of stillness that feels sacred. When the newest readings arrived, they brought something delicate but unmistakable. The pulse had slowed again, stretching out across longer intervals, softer each time, like the rhythm of a heartbeat easing into sleep. It wasn't decay, it was intention. The light curve showed no signs of exhaustion or random fading. It was deliberate. Atlas was slowing itself down. Some of the scientists smiled quietly when they saw it. They knew the language of space well enough to understand what that meant. The object wasn't dying, it was resting. As days passed, the pulse began to form. Waves within waves, smaller ripples hidden inside the larger rhythm, like breathing layered over heartbeat. The graphs looked beautiful, though no one said it aloud. Every curve felt graceful, like the motion of water or wind. The universe, so vast and cold, suddenly seemed gentle. Someone once said that science, at its best, is not about control, but about listening. That was what Atlas had taught them. How to listen differently. One evening, the observatory team converted the latest light readings into sound waves, just as they had done before. This time, they slowed the playback down until the tone became deep and almost human. It filled the room like a low hum, rising and falling in calm intervals, each resonance fading into the next. No one spoke. The sound was soft, peaceful, almost comforting. It didn't feel alien. It felt alive, but not in a way that frightened anyone. It reminded them of waves brushing against a shore, of wind moving through leaves, of something vast remembering to breathe. When the tone ended, there was silence. Not awkward silence, but the kind that feels full. It was as if the sound hadn't stopped at all, only moved somewhere else. A researcher finally whispered, "It feels like it's at peace." Everyone agreed without words. The following week, NASA quietly released a short bulletin, brief and careful. Atlas remained stable, observed frequency fluctuations consistent with residual energy transitions. The statement said nothing, yet it sounded like closure. The world barely noticed. News moved on. But those who had been there, who had watched the light, felt something different. They didn't see it as an ending. They felt it as a continuation, like a lullaby that fades not because it's finished, but because the listener has fallen asleep. Night after night, the observatories kept watching. Even when Atlas grew too faint to see directly, the instruments kept listening. In that endless distance, they found comfort. The pulse had become part of the background noise of the universe, folded into cosmic static, indistinguishable from the hum of stars. But if you listened long enough, if you filtered carefully, you could still find it. That same slow heartbeat. Somewhere out there, Atlas was still moving, still humming softly to itself, like a traveler who knows the way home. As the months turned into years, new generations of scientists joined the projects that Atlas had inspired. Some studied deep space resonance, others built listening stations tuned to the faintest whispers of the cosmos. They didn't call it surveillance, they called it companionship, because that's what it felt like now, as though Atlas had reminded them that the universe isn't empty. It's patient. Every echo is a conversation waiting to be understood. In classrooms and documentaries, the story of Atlas was told not as a tale of fear or discovery, but as one of serenity, a reminder that sometimes the unknown isn't a threat, it's an invitation. The calm rhythm of that distant traveler became a symbol of how curiosity can be gentle and awe can be quiet. Artists painted it as a spiral of light. Musicians turned its frequencies into harmonies. And those who couldn't see or hear it anymore simply remembered that for a brief moment, humanity had listened and the universe had listened back. Eventually, when the last trace of Atlas's signal faded beyond the reach of our receivers, the scientists didn't mourn. They smiled, knowing that the data was still out there somewhere, folded into the vastness, drifting like a dream that never quite ends. The hum they once studied became part of their own breathing, a rhythm that stayed even in silence. The universe, after all, had many travelers. Atlas was just the first to make us aware of how softly they move, and maybe that was its message all along. That motion and memory are the same thing. That light doesn't disappear. It only travels farther than our eyes can follow. And that even in the deepest dark, there's a kind of peace that never stops shining. By the time Atlas had faded beyond Mercury's orbit, the world had grown quiet about it. There were no headlines now, no breaking updates, just silence. The kind that stays when something vast has finished speaking. In the observatories, the lights still glowed through the night. Screens flickered softly. A few researchers stayed behind, even when the official missions had ended. They said they didn't want to lose the feeling of listening. The instruments hummed, steady and patient. Sometimes the data came back empty. Sometimes there was noise, and sometimes, faint and trembling, the rhythm returned. It wasn't bright anymore. It wasn't sharp or strong, but if you looked closely, there it was, a pulse, soft as breath. Every 6 hours, the same echo whispered through the noise. It didn't carry information. It carried memory. Like a clock that had forgotten its purpose but remembered the sound of time. No one called it discovery anymore. They called it presence, because even from the edge of darkness, Atlas still made the sky feel alive. The younger astronomers didn't see data points. They saw patience, a reminder that science isn't about control. It's about connection, about learning to wait. Some nights, they would slow the playback speed and listen. The tone that came through was deep and steady, almost like a heartbeat, soft, low, endless. It filled the room like warmth. The sound didn't demand attention. It simply existed, like the hum of air before sleep or the quiet between waves. And slowly, people began to understand that maybe Atlas wasn't moving away. Maybe it was simply becoming part of everything else. Months passed, and the data streams grew thinner. But then, one evening, something gentle happened. The pulse shifted. Not by much. Just a tiny, graceful delay. It was the first change in months, and yet it felt like a smile, as if Atlas was saying goodbye. The signal was still soft, still rhythmic, but now it carried a calm unevenness, the way breathing changes when you're drifting off to sleep. The scientists listened for hours. No one spoke. It didn't feel like an ending. It felt like exhale. When the pulse finally stopped, there was no announcement, no panic, only a quiet acknowledgement, a shared understanding that the silence meant peace. Atlas had gone beyond the reach of every telescope, beyond the language of numbers and graphs, but it hadn't disappeared. It had simply become still. The next morning, one of the senior researchers left a note on the whiteboard. It said, "Atlas is asleep. The universe is still awake." And that sentence stayed there for months. No one erased it. No one needed to, because that's how it felt. Like something vast had closed its eyes, not forever, but just for a while. The story of Atlas spread quietly, not through headlines, but through whispers. People told it softly, the way they tell stories before bed, about a traveler that came close to the sun, survived its fire, and drifted away, humming a song too gentle for words. Children asked if it was alive, and the answer was always the same. Maybe not in the way we are, but in the way stars breathe, in the way silence listens, in the way light never truly leaves. And so, in the stillness of the night sky, Atlas kept drifting. No longer bright, no longer loud, but forever part of the quiet music of space. Somewhere in that endless dark, it was still moving, slowly, peacefully, beautifully. And if you listen long enough, you can still hear it. That calm, rhythmic heartbeat of a traveler who came close enough to remind us how soft the universe can be. Far beyond the warmth of sunlight, Atlas drifted into a deeper kind of quiet. Not the empty silence of space, but something softer, like the world holding its breath. No one could see it now. No telescope, no radar, no signal strong enough to reach that far. Yet those who had studied it still felt its presence, not in data, but in memory. The hum that once filled their instruments had faded. But sometimes, late at night, when the room was still, they swore they could hear it again. Faint, steady, peaceful. It wasn't sound, it was something else. Something remembered. Atlas had become part of them, part of the rhythm they carried inside. The rhythm of patience, of curiosity, of wonder. One of the scientists once said, "The hardest thing in the universe isn't distance, it's letting go." And she was right, because even as Atlas vanished, it refused to feel gone. It felt eternal. Years passed, new missions launched, new discoveries filled the sky. But every once in a while, an unexplained signal would appear. A pulse, perfectly spaced, faint as a dream. And though most dismissed it as interference, a few recognized it instantly. The same pattern, the same piece. They would smile quietly, never logging it officially. Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. Some are meant to be remembered. In time, the Atlas data became part of classrooms, documentaries, even art. Its hum was turned into soundtracks for planetariums. Children listened to it with their eyes closed, hearing what space truly sounds like. Not chaos, but calm. Teachers would tell them, "This is the sound of motion learning to rest." And in that stillness, imagination bloomed. Meanwhile, the original observatories that once tracked Atlas grew old. In Mauna Kea, an engineer retired after 40 years. Before he left, he went to the observation deck one last time. The stars shimmered above, silent and clear. He whispered into the dark, "We're still listening." It wasn't a plea, it was a promise. Because Atlas had taught them that listening was never about answers. It was about connection. The kind that stays even when the sound is gone. Somewhere in the vast stretch of nothingness, Atlas kept moving. Not fast, not far, just steady. Its surface cold now, reflecting no light. But that rhythm it once carried, the heartbeat of 6 pulses, might still echo in the dark, flowing through the thin waves of space like a lullaby for the universe. Maybe that was its purpose all along. Not to reveal, not to warn, but to comfort. To remind those who watch that the unknown doesn't have to be frightening. Sometimes it's just quiet. As the decades passed, the name Atlas became more legend than record. It was no longer a code in a catalogue. It was a story. A gentle reminder that even in a cold universe, something can choose to move with grace. The scientists grew older, and new eyes took their place. The new generation didn't see Atlas the same way. They didn't chase it, they honored it, because Atlas wasn't just a mystery, it was a feeling. A reminder that wonder can be slow, that beauty doesn't always flash. Sometimes it drifts. And so, somewhere between stars and silence, Atlas continued its quiet journey. It wasn't alone. Nothing ever truly is. Every particle, every echo, every forgotten pulse carries memory. Perhaps Atlas had never left. Perhaps it was always meant to dissolve into the rhythm of the universe, a single note becoming part of the song. If you close your eyes long enough, you can almost hear it, that low hum, the same one that began near the sun, still calm, still steady, still singing softly to anyone willing to listen. And maybe that's what peace sounds like. A traveler who never stopped moving, a silence that never stopped speaking. The stars were quiet that night. Soft light shimmered across the black, unbroken sky. Somewhere, far beyond all that could be seen, Atlas drifted on. No signal now, no pulse, no glow, only motion, gentle and constant. For the people who had once watched it, life had gone on. The observatories were quieter. The screens that had once displayed its rhythm now showed other things, galaxies, storms, data. But in their hearts, the rhythm remained. Once you've listened that deeply, silence never sounds the same again. In one of the old labs, a dusty drive still stored Atlas's final readings. The files hadn't been opened in years, until one night, a young researcher found them by accident. He played back the last transmission. What came through wasn't noise, it was peace. What came through wasn't noise, it was peace. A soft hum filled the speakers, low and warm, like wind moving through deep water. He didn't understand what he was hearing, but it made him stop. For a long time, he just listened. And in that sound, he felt time slow down. He called it the sound of stillness. Later, others would too. As decades passed, Atlas became a story more than a discovery. Children learned about it in the quiet chapters of science documentaries. A traveler from between the stars that behaved unlike anything before it. Teachers spoke softly when they mentioned its name. It wasn't about fear or mystery, it was about wonder. They told it like a lullaby. The story of something that came close, warmed itself by the sun, then drifted away with grace. It didn't vanish, it transformed. Somewhere beyond the reach of sunlight, Atlas may still be moving. No one can say for sure. Maybe it found others like itself. Quiet travelers gliding through the dark. Maybe it became part of the dust and gas that births new stars. Or maybe it just kept going, carrying that gentle pulse through the empty sea of space, waiting for someone new to listen. Whatever it became, it left behind a rhythm that changed how people looked at the night. Now, when astronomers sit beneath the dome of the sky, they don't rush, they breathe slower. They listen longer, because Atlas taught them that discovery doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. In the deep cold of interstellar space, there is no sound. But if you could hear it, if you could translate the motion of dust and light into music, you'd find harmony there. Soft, patient, unending. Atlas would be part of that song now. A note so quiet you could miss it if you weren't still enough to notice. And that's the beauty of it. It's not about being found. It's about being felt. On clear nights when the air is cold and still, some say you can almost sense it. That slow, rhythmic calm that once pulsed through our solar system. Maybe it's imagination. Maybe it's memory. But either way, it feels like presence. A reminder that everything in the universe, no matter how small or far away, moves to a rhythm. That every star, every planet, every breath of light carries a heartbeat. And once in a while, if you listen closely enough, two rhythms meet and recognize each other. That's what happened when we met Atlas. It wasn't discovery. It was recognition. The data, the graphs, the debates, they all faded with time. What remained was a feeling, a quiet moment shared between humanity and the unknown. The realization that even across the emptiness of space, connection is possible. And maybe that's what Atlas came to show us. That curiosity isn't about chasing answers. It's about learning to sit still, to listen, to notice what speaks in silence. Because in the end, the universe doesn't shout. It hums, and if you stay very quiet, you can still hear it. Time moved softly after Atlas. The years blended like mist, slow and weightless. People changed, machines evolved, but the memory stayed. Some stories fade. This one never did. There were no new signals, no bright discoveries, no sudden returns. only the quiet truth that Atlas had existed. Once close, then far, then everywhere. For many, that was enough. At night, some of the old scientists would look up and smile. They didn't search anymore. They just watched. The stars had begun to feel like company. They knew that even if Atlas was gone from sight, it had left something behind. A new way of listening, a slower way of thinking, a kind of peace. In one university lecture, a professor told her students, "Atlas changed us not because it was strange, but because it was gentle." The class fell silent. She smiled. We expected answers. Instead, it gave us patience. Those words stayed with the students long after the lesson ended. Some went on to build listening arrays. Some wrote music inspired by its rhythm. Others simply looked at the night sky with softer eyes. In the cold of deep space, Atlas continued its quiet drift. Maybe it no longer pulsed, maybe it no longer glowed, but motion doesn't end, it only slows. And so it floated through the dark, steady as thought. Each time a distant star flickered, each time a signal hummed faintly against the noise, someone somewhere wondered, could it be Atlas again? No one knew, no one needed to, because Atlas was more than an object. It had become an idea, a reminder that discovery and peace can share the same silence. When the Lurus array celebrated its 50th year, they replayed the old data. The hum still worked its quiet spell. The same soft waves rose and fell, patient as breathing. No one spoke for a while. It felt like the whole room was listening to the heartbeat of the universe. A researcher whispered, "It's still beautiful," another answered, "It always will be." As decades passed, Atlas's trail grew colder, then vanished completely from detection. No record of impact, no signal of decay, just absence, elegant and complete. Some called it mystery, others called it poetry, because in a way, both were true. Space holds on to what it loves, and Atlas had become part of that endless holding. In time, the story was retold as a bedtime tale for children who loved the stars. Parents spoke softly as they reached the final line, and somewhere beyond the edge of sunlight, Atlas still drifts. Watching, listening, dreaming, the children always asked if it would ever come back. The answer was gentle, maybe not as light, maybe as a whisper, and that was enough. Even now, whenever a deep space microphone catches a random hum or a signal that doesn't fit, someone smiles before checking the calibration. They know it's not Atlas, but they still hope just for a moment, because hope is its own kind of listening. And in that listening, Atlas is alive again. At the edge of everything we can measure, the universe still hums. Maybe that hum is Atlas. Maybe it's just the sound of creation breathing slowly in its sleep. Either way, it feels the same. Quiet, kind, endless. There is a kind of peace that only comes after listening for a very long time. That is what Atlas left behind. It never spoke in words. It never sent a message. It simply moved, slowly, gently, always forward. And somehow, that was enough to change us. The world learned to look at the sky differently, not as something distant, but as something alive. People began to understand that silence isn't empty. It's filled with motion too small, too soft for us to see. In that understanding, humanity found calm, the kind that doesn't come from answers, but from acceptance. Not everything needs to be known. Some things only need to be felt. On quiet nights, in observatories long since automated, the machines still turn their dishes to the stars. They sweep the darkness with quiet patience, searching not for signals, but for rhythm. And in the soft static of the universe, there's always a pulse. Faint, steady, familiar. Perhaps it's Atlas. Perhaps it's just the echo of our own curiosity, reflected back through time. Either way, it feels like a heartbeat. Sometimes, new engineers who have never heard the old story ask why the receivers are never shut down. The older ones always smile and say, because something out there might still be listening. Atlas had no beginning we could trace, and no ending we could measure. It simply existed within the vast calm of the universe. It passed through our world the way a thought passes through the mind, leaving behind a quiet awareness that wasn't there before. The scientists who once tracked it grew old. Many retired. Some stayed. They didn't expect new discoveries anymore. They just liked being near the sound of the cosmos, that low, eternal hum that feels almost like breathing. Even after all the years, the same phrase was whispered whenever someone looked toward the outer dark. Atlas is still moving, and perhaps that's true. Perhaps perhaps somewhere in the deep cold between stars, it continues its endless journey. No light, no voice, no name, just rhythm, just grace. Or perhaps it has already dissolved, its atoms scattered, its memory woven into the space between things. Maybe that's what all travelers do in the end. They return not to where they began, but to where they belong, to motion, to silence, to peace. If you close your eyes and listen carefully, you can almost hear it. A faint hum beneath the noise of your own thoughts. Soft, calm, endless. That is Atlas. That is the sound of the universe remembering itself. And as long as we keep listening, it will never be gone.